This video is going to explain how to use the on-site hauling calculator. It's under the Trucks and Scrapers tab. So it's called on-site hauling. It's really used for scrapers, and so by default you can change it to whatever you want, but we have 621s here and 623s. This just means cut and fill typical, grubbing typical, but you can use it for whatever you want. But the reason it's called on-site hauling is because you can also use it for a loader. These are kind of average times that we looked at for moving material with a loader. So if you have to move a pile, or maybe it's just too long for a dozer to push, but it's too little of a quantity to bring scrapers out or rock trucks out, so loader is the way to go. And then there's one for rock trucks as well, with according to the way a rock truck works. So the way that this works is you put in the average haul distance one way in first. So you can just get on PlanSwift and draw the route of the scrapers. Usually you want to pick kind of the middle of the cuts and the middle of the fills, maybe go a little further. But don't draw just a straight line, because usually scrapers kind of go in a more of a loop or a circular kind of motion. So give yourself a little bit longer of a distance in order for the scrapers to give them a good route to move. So let's say in this case the average haul distance is 1,000 feet. So we're going to put 1,000 feet in there, and that's just one way. We're going to put in the load time for a push scraper. I know that it can load quicker than this, but we found that on average, just going out with stopwatches, at least according to what we're currently capable of doing, it takes us about a minute to load a 621 on average. Dump time is about 30 seconds, so 0.5 minutes. And then we put on average about 0.7 minutes for this is just when they get stuck behind multiple scrapers, or it can be a machine breakdown, or there's a variety of things that they got to get out and look at a cut. Hopefully, these are great areas that we can reduce waste in, but for right now, this is about where we've observed the scrapers and what they've been able to do. The next section in there is average speed. So it's defaulted to 9 miles an hour. That includes speeding up, slowing down, and your top speed. So right now, again, we have that at 9 miles an hour. If the distance were to go further, you would assume that the speed, you'd be able to maintain a higher speed for longer. So it could creep up as much as 10, 11, 12, 15 miles an hour. And, obviously your haul roads, you're going to make determinations on that too. So if you look here, if I increase that speed, what it does here is it changes the travel time for one way down to 0.95 minutes, so under a minute to get there. Whereas if they're going only 9 miles an hour, it takes 1.26 minutes to get to its destination. The next number here is cubic yards in the scraper. I know like the K can hold more material. We weighed the K, and the K can actually hold closer to 21. But from everything we've seen, the 21s are holding roughly 15 loose yards of material when they get pushed on average. When they get pushed, and that's how much loose material gets in there. A good way to figure out, or you run this conversion a little bit different as well. I guess there's a couple of different ways that you can describe this. I always have this as the actual capacity of loose material in the scraper. So I don't really convert it according to the type of material that we're loading. If you look down here, we have material conversions. Sand, we figure will fluff up about 10% in the cab. Common earth about 20%, and clay about 28%. But for the purposes of this calculator, this 15 yards in the scraper is just how many loose yards we can fit in the scraper. So the production here, and that's why I have this highlighted in red, is loose cubic yards per hour is 190 loose cubic yards. And if you see here, bank cubic yards is 152 cubic yards. So you may be picking up 152 yards out of the ground, but when it's loaded, you're moving 190 loose yards. So this is the number we really care about. We really don't care about bank yards in this scenario. So now we have a round trip. According to this, the round trip of that scraper is going to be 4.73 minutes per round trip at that distance in those productions. One other thing over to the side, just to give you an idea, if you really wanted to get, and your scraper crews were on point, and you really wanted to dial this in and get this average speed ups, and and those type of things. If you look over to the right here, I plotted the cat book. There's some for 621s. There's some charts on scrapers on flat ground. We haven't put any factors in there for the slope or anything. This just kind of assumes flat ground. You'll have to adjust your speeds and things like that if you got steep hills and things like that. This is just for general flat ground projects. But right here you have scraper one-way times in the cat book. Plotting their chart, according to this, 1,000 feet. They should be able to drive that 1,000 feet in 0.75 minutes. And if you look over here, we have 1.26. So the cat book thinks that you can go, I don't know, yeah, looks like about 15 miles an hour of an average speed in order to do it per the cat book. But they're in good conditions. They're really ramping it up to see how fast they can move. But it just goes to show you how much faster you can move if you can get the conditions right and get the paved roads right and train your guys how to get up to speed and do everything they need to. But for the purposes of this, we usually keep it around 9 miles an hour and then get it faster if the haul distances get further. So again, round trip 4.73 minutes. So how do we know what our production is? Well, depending on how many cubic yards we're moving may depend on how many scrapers, and depending on what the distance is may depend on how many scrapers. 1,000 feet is relatively short haul distance for scrapers. So in this case, we could bring 2 out, we could bring 3 out. I mean, it just really kind of depends on what you think. We usually try to bring at least 3 scrapers out. If it was really short, you might overwhelm the dozer and you'd have a scraper sitting there. So in this case, with 1,000 feet, I think we can handle 3 scrapers. That'd probably be a good analysis for a future video, and try to figure out how many scrapers for how many feet they're having to travel. So in this case, we're going to put 3 scrapers in. Hours of active production. What that means is how many hours are they going to spend actually in the process of moving the dirt in a 10-hour day. So this is just according to questions we've asked here, and most crews don't get a full 9 hours of production in a 10-hour day. There's stop time where the machines are turned off. There's at the beginning of the day we're doing our safety stuff, and we're cleaning equipment, and we're doing everything in our time cards to get ready for the day. And so you lose some time, and so based off of that, we're saying we're going to only get 8 hours of actual production during the day. Cubic yards moved per day, all that's doing is just taking our production and how many loose cubic yards we're moving per hour and our hours of production, and it's telling us that we can move 4,571 cubic yards in one day based off of the parameters that we gave it. And obviously, if our speed were to go up to the cat manual, 15 miles an hour, your production goes up dramatically. And so there's all these factors are going to change it. If you got your load time on point down to 30 seconds on every single push, obviously your cubic yards per hour are going to go up. But on average, this is where we're finding our crews are capable of doing at the moment. I showed this on another video, but you can also put in the total cubic yards. So if you had, let's say, 75,000 yards of material that you had to move, then it would also give you the total days that you needed to move it based off of how many you were moving per day. This is just kind of handy. I talked about in another video, there's a rule of thumb tab here, but it's kind of handy if you need to give people schedules and things like that, just to give them a rough idea so you don't have to open up HeavyBid and figure out the whole thing. So again, all these other ones, the 623 works the same. I just changed the load, dump time, downtime according to what we were seeing with stopwatches and things like that, but it works exactly the same way. Loader's actually exactly the same way too. Average haul distance, one way for the loader. Um, and then we just have different dump times and load times, and this one has a little bit of a different um, number here because a lot of the times with loader we're not just moving it, but we're actually spreading it and grading it because we'll actually push it out and fill an area. So we put 1 minute to push it out and grade the area too. And so that'll help it. That can give you a production for a loader moving a dirt. And then rock truck, really the only difference between it and a scraper is that the load time is usually more. You got to spend more time loading a rock truck. Can't just push it and load it. And on this one, we actually changed the truck capacity over to tons. And so um, that's a little bit different because that's usually how we bid that. And so it's tons moved per day is the way that this one gets changed. But that's how all that stuff works.